Hi there, this is Patricia from patriciafenty.com, and today I'm going to show you how you can take Freeform Crochet Scrumbles and join them together. And I do have tutorials on how to make these basic scrumbles. I'll show you how you can join them together to make fabric and to make a specific shape and all the little tips and techniques to make the fabric in the shape that you like. And there's so many possibilities and projects you can make with Freeform Crochet and using this technique. And I will apologize in advance. My old computer crashed and I have a new computer, and my camera doesn't like the new computer, and I'm learning new video editing software as well. So I'm having problems with lighting and focus, and so I'm sorry ahead of time. But I know you'll be able to see what I'm doing, and this is just so much fun, and I'm really excited to show you how you can take your Freeform Crochet Scrumbles and make a nice piece of fabric like this. So let's get started. So you're going to start with your scrumbles, and I do have a tutorial on how to do basic Freeform Crochet Scrumbles, and I'll put a link to that below. And it can be helpful to have some of the beginning shapes, and I have a tutorial on beginning shapes as well, some triangles and squares and circles. And when you're doing your scrumbles, you can leave the last round of yarn because you can use that tail to sew your scrumbles together. You don't have to darn it in. You can leave the little piece like that. So I've left the tails here because that might be handy to sew. And you want to work on a flat surface. And then you want to use the yarns that you used in your scrumbles, a darning needle, some scissors, and the crochet hook, whatever size you used for your scrumbles. And you're going to need a template of some sort. I'm doing this on a square piece. It's 11 inches by 12 inches. And of course, you can make the fabric in any shape that you like. So you could use a pattern piece. You could make a jacket or a vest or any garment and use the pattern piece. And all you do is you make your fabric and eliminate the seam allowance. So you take out this and you work within the dotted line here and don't include the seam allowance. But the joining techniques and filling in the gaps and all that will be exactly the same, whether using an actual shaped pattern or making a square or a rectangle or whatever shape you want to make. So I'll show you the next step. Now, working on a flat surface, you want to then arrange your scrumbles to fit within the template that you have. So I've already played around with these, and this is the best fit that I have come up with. And you want to take into account the colors. Like, you wouldn't want to join two scrumbles together that have the same color on the outside. You want to have different colors where you're joining them together. So I wouldn't join these two greens together like that. And then you also want to try to find the best seams, the longest seams, to join the scrumbles and make it the best fit possible. So you can play around with that a bit, and of course keeping the scrumbles within the frame of your template. And so what we're going to do is we're going to join all the main pieces together, and then we'll start to fill in the gaps and fill in around the outside. So once you have the layout the way that you want it, then you can start to sew the pieces together. So I think I'm going to have these guys in here. So I'll start by sewing this seam together here and this seam together here. Now, if you want, you can take a picture of this. If it's a bigger piece, you might want to take a picture of how you laid out your scrumbles. You can also safety pin them together if you like. So I'm going to start with these two here, and I'll just put this out of the way. And so if you have some sort of something you can put on your lap, you can work on your lap so long as you have a flat surface. And so we're going to join into the back. So lay them together the way you like it. And if you don't have any tails to work with, just cut a piece of yarn that's about double the length and a little bit of the seam that you're going to join. And you'll put that on your darning needle. And then we'll work into the back. So flip it over. And what you have is on the back of these pieces, you have your top seam here, like the top loop, and just beside that you have the back loop of the stitch, and those are the stitches we're going to sew into. You're not going to sew into this stitch, which is like your top loop around the outside of the scrumble. You're sewing into this back loop, and basically we're just going to do a whip stitch. So just line it up where it looks nice. So starting in this back loop here and going over to the back loop on the other side. And I'm sorry this color is so dark because again my camera isn't working properly. But so you can leave a little tail there to join or to darn in later. And so you just do a whip stitch. So pick up this back loop on this scrumble and the back loop on the next scrumble. And sometimes if you have the half double crochets, these loops can be a little bit tricky to find, but just do the best that you can. Just find a stitch to work into the back of the motif. And so then you'll come over and work into the next stitch and go over to the other scrumble. And so you'll just whip stitch all the way along until you get to the end. And it's super simple, and it's a very, very neat stitch. And see, there I was probably going into the back of a half double crochet. So here we go. I'm coming to the end here, and I'm doing the last stitch as far as I think I can go, and then just leave your tail for now because you might use that when you're joining on another scrumble. So you can see here on the front what a nice join that makes. So I'm going to go ahead and join these two scrumbles together in the same way. And again, I've got these dark colors, so I'll just join this seam together here, and then I'll show you how we'll begin to fill in some of the gaps and join these two pieces together. All right, so I've sewn this seam together here, and I've just kept this red yarn attached. So now I'm going to place that back on my template and just sort of fit it where I think it will fit nicely. So we're going to want to fill in this piece here. And depending on your shape of scrumbles, this will be completely unique, but the technique will be the same. So I'm going to do this in pink. I'll start with pink. You could use any color you like. I think though the pink is the best choice here. So you start with a slip knot, keep your tail to the right, put that on your hook, and I'm going to go into this stitch here just before where I want to start to create some height. So just flip the tail over and do a slip stitch, and you can join the yarn on any way you like. This is just the way I do it. So in the next stitch, I'm going to do a single crochet because I know we're tapering up. And I'm just working into the top loops here as I did in these scrumbles. You know, you can do any way you like, but the technique I use is just going into the top loop. So now I'm going to increase up to a half double crochet, just building the height, and you can just take a little look and see if that's working out. Yeah, that looks good. And now I know I'm going to want to build the height to a double crochet. So you're just going into the side of the stitch here where the scrumbles are joined, treating that as a stitch. And you may not be able to build the height of this all in one swoop, but just do the best that you can. We'll see how it goes. So now I'm going to do some double crochets. Now this here, I didn't darn it in, but I am going to darn this in now because I want to use that as a stitch. So I'll just darn this in because I want to use this as a stitch. So I'll just quickly bring that in, and so I have something there to stitch into. I should probably cut that tail off, but anyways, I might need it, so I'm just leaving it for now. All right, so now I'm going into that piece that I just sewed in, and I'll do a double crochet there, and then a double crochet going into the next scrumble, and do a double crochet there. And there's no real rules to this. You can make the stitch height any height that you want, but just keeping it consistent. I'm working into the top loops only, and I'm working only with single, half double, double, and treble crochets for this design. So you can just take a little look and see how it looks, and see how nicely that's filling in. So I'm going to keep going, and I know when I get to this part here, I'm going to do the treble crochets for these 3 stitches. I'll do trebles because I want that stitch to be quite high. And of course, these are American trebles, so yarn over twice and pull that through 3 times. And so now, if you haven't seen the tutorial on how to do the scrumbles, one of the things I talk about is when you want to increase a stitch when the work starts to pull to the right, meaning you want to do 2 stitches in the same stitch, because I need to bring the height of this over to the left. And so I'm going to do another treble in that same stitch. So I'm increasing by doing 2 stitches into the one stitch to bring that straight up and down. So you're using some of the techniques that you used in the tutorial on how to do the basic freeform crochet scrumble. And then I'm going to do another one, and that's 3 trebles. So I'm just going to take it off my hook and see how it looks. And that looks really nice. See how nicely that's fitting in? That's quite perfect. So I'll do another treble here, and then I'll start to bring the height of this down by going into doubles. So I'll do a treble into this next stitch. So I only had to do an increase in that one stitch. And so now I'm going to go down to a double, bringing the height of these stitches down, do another double. And then I'll take a look and see how this is coming along, and see how it's creating that shape. All right, great. So now I'm going to go down to a half double crochet. And so you're literally custom fitting these pieces as you go. And I'll do another half double crochet, and then I'll do a single crochet, and then I'll go back in and see how that looks. And oh, that's very nice. See how nice that is? So now all you have to do is fasten off. So I'll do a slip stitch into the next stitch to bring that last stitch down, and you want to cut off a fairly decent tail so that you can use that to sew the 2 scrumbles together now. And look how nice that fits. So then you'll just sew the scrumbles together there in the same way using the whip stitch. And so I'll just use this tail here, and I'll stitch that seam right along there. in the exact same way, and I'll come back and show you how we can fill in some of these gaps here. All right, so I sewed that together, and when I came down here I ran out of yarn from this tail, so I just took the yarn from this tail and carried on and joined the seam there. So now I'll flip it back over and you can see how lovely that looks, and we already have a nice piece of fabric here. So once you have your template filled sort of to the outsides, you have your basic shape, then you have the outsides here to deal with. And this is a fairly big piece here. I would almost crochet another little scrumble to put in here, and I think that's what I'll do that. And what we can do here is we can use some of these beginning shapes. The triangles are perfect. So we'll do that there. And you could put a triangle right in here. Just sew that in, tuck it in as best as you can there. And we'll deal with that little gap later, that little hole there. And you can add circles in. Circles work really well. And so that would fit nicely, and you could work off of the side of the circle there. And this is a fairly big piece here, so I may make a piece for that as well. And let's see, put a triangle here. Actually, that's really good. And then I'll show you a trick how to fill in this gap, because we don't have enough stitches there. So triangle there, and I've got another triangle here. I have a pink one here, so that'll go nicely in there. So those beginning shapes are helpful to fill in some of these gaps. So I'll sew these all on and put that one on as well, although I may change my mind. And then I'll come back and I'll show you how to fill in these gaps here and how to fill in around the circumference. Welcome back. So I've set my camera up a little bit differently, and it's an overcast day, so the lighting is a little bit better, and I'm really having such a hard time with this new computer and my camera. But anyways, I've gone ahead and I've added these triangle shapes. I did go ahead and I made a little scrumble here and sewed that on using the whip stitch. And so now I have my scramble out to the perimeter. I'm at an edge. I have an edge here, there's an edge there, and there's edges along here. So now we're going to work in and filling in these outside edges. And I've been leaving my tails on because I may use those. The tails that I know I won't use, I darn into the back. So here's this little hole, and I'll show you how you can fill that in. When you add little scrumble pieces, you may end up with a hole. And I filled this one in here already. And what we're doing is a weaving technique to fill in that hole. And I'll show you how to do that next. And I forgot to mention that you can always use safety pins to hold your individual scrumble pieces together as you're sewing them together. So we're going to go ahead and do a little weaving technique right here. And I'll show you that next. And another thing I forgot to mention was that I had this little shape here. This was from the tutorial on beginning shapes, and that fit very nicely. So I just sewed that on as well. So you can crochet all kinds of individual pieces and sew them on, or I can't remember if I mentioned this, you can just start with, say, with one scrumble and keep going round and round and round and adding different shapes and building your fabric in that way. So it's really very much a creative process. That's why they call it freeform crochet. But anyways, let's fill in this little gap. So you could use any of these colors that are surrounding it. I'm going to use the light teal color, and I'll just turn it this way so I can join on from this side. So we're going to essentially create a little weaving frame. So I'll sew in my thread here and leave a little tail that I can darn in. So I'm going to create a weaving frame. So I'm going to bring my needle in under that stitch there, and then I'm going to turn around and come back beside it, going into the next stitch, and come down right beside it into the teal triangle like that, and just lay these strands side by side so they're nice and close. You don't want them on top of each other, just nice and close side by side. And then bring this back up into the pink. And if you're a weaver, of course, this will make sense to you. And then come down beside it, going into a different stitch and going down beside that strand of yarn. And just do as many strands of yarn as you need to fill in the gap. It doesn't have to be an even or odd amount. And you want to make sure they're nice and snug, so just snug that up. So you have the frame ready there, and then you're going to come from the other direction and you're going to weave in and out of those pieces, and you want to catch fabric from each scrumble on either side. So I'm going to come under this blue piece, and then I'll go over and under and over and under, and then into the next scrumble here. Whoopsie. Got a little tangle there, and pull that through and sort of push that down with your needle, and then you're going to come back going in the under the opposite thread. So here we're going to start by going over this first one, so you're going in the opposite thread, so over and then under, over, under, and then pick up a stitch in this scrumble here in the blue part, and then just push that down, and then we're going to work back. So you want to go over because you came the other way under, so you're going to go over and then under and then over and then under and then into the other scrumble. And that's looking pretty good, and I think I'll come back one more time. And well, let me see, I'm going to just take a peek. I'm going to flip it around and see how it looks. And yeah, you can see it's too loose there, so you definitely want one more row in there. So just push the strands down and make it a little tighter fit. There we go. And then come back with one more. So what do we have here? So now I have to go under and then over, under and over, and then into this blue one. And you can flip it over and take another peek, and there you go. And that's just a nice way to fill in that little gap. And you might have where maybe you bring a circular motif and there's just a little bit of a gap, and you might just do a little crisscross stitch and just fill it in with your darning needle and just go back and forth and just make a little bit of a filler with crisscross and back and forth, and you won't even see. So that's how you can fill in the little holes. And next, and then of course you're darning your tail in. So next we're going to start to fill in some of these gaps. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we'll start filling in, and I want to show you how to do a fan stitch. And these are really great to use in all the little V places to fill them in. And you can use any number of stitches to create the fan. So we'll start with this one. And thinking about colors, the colors you could use here would be, you want to look at the motif. You could use the pink, you could use the wine color, You could use the green. I'm going to use the green. You could also use this dark purple. I haven't been using this though because it's too hard to demonstrate with. So I'll just show you using with the green. So what we're going to do is we'll join on a new color using a slip knot. And again, you can join on a new color any way you like, but I do it this way. And what you want to do is you want to join on where the stitch is about a double crochet high. So I know the second stitch here is about the same height as a double crochet. So I'm going to put my hook through the loop, bring it in from behind, flip the tail over and do a slip stitch. And again, you can join on any way you like. So from here, we're just going to work down into this V, and all your stitches will go into the V and we'll create a fan to fill in that space. So do a double crochet down into that V and pick up a couple of strands of yarn if you can find a couple of strands of yarn, and you'll probably be going into maybe even the darned in tails. It doesn't have to be a stitch. It can be the tail that you darned in. And so you'll just work your double crochets along here, and I'm just going to take a peek and you can see how that is filling in that gap. And you can see you'll need at least one more double crochet, maybe even two. So go back into that V and do another double crochet and then just lay it down here and see how that looks. And that looks good. And so now what we'll do is you take your hook out and you flip it over, and this is a little bit tricky, and you're going to go in from behind here and pick up one of those back loops and bring the yarn in from behind. And then you can do a chain one to fasten it off and cut your tail and pull that through, snug that up. And you can either darn in your tail end now if you like, or just wait. You might use that. And so you filled that in with a nice fan stitch. So you can do one here. This would be a good place. And I'll show this again, but you can forward and go past this. So I'm going to use this dark purple because I do want to bring it up here. So again, you're going to create a slip knot, put that on your hook and go up as high as a double crochet. And it is usually into the second stitch of the scrumble. Go into that top loop, grab your yarn from behind, flip your tail over and do a slip stitch. There we go. And then I'll work a double crochet down into the bottom of that V. I want to catch two pieces of yarn, so I'll pick up, there we go. So I've got two pieces of yarn and work a double crochet. This yarn is, the ply is very loose on this. And then do another double crochet down into that V. And just take a peek, and I can see I need another one. Come on. And yeah, if you're working into your, like where you've darned in your tail ends, it could be a little bit tight here. And then take that off and see how that fits, and see that's a nice fit there. So I'll flip it over and finish this off in the back as before. So going into the stitch closest, going into the back loop, you'll grab your loop and pull that in from behind, snug that up, and then do a chain one to fasten off and snug that up. And then again, you can just darn in those tail ends. So now you can see what you have is this nice smooth shape that would be easier to crochet a row into. So I would do like single crochets and then like half double crochets and then go into double crochets through here and come up here, go into half double crochets and then taper into single crochets and then a slip stitch. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fill it in like that. So you can go ahead and use these fan stitches to fill in any of the sort of sharp corners that you want to fill in. And if it isn't too big of a V, you can just leave it because you can work into that with bigger crochet stitches. So fill in all the spaces with a fan stitch and I'll come back and show you how this looks. All right, so I had actually gone all the way around here with double crochets and it was too much pink, so I pulled out and I've come back to a half double crochet here. And so I'd started this with a slip stitch and a couple of single crochets, and now I've done 2 half double crochets in this stitch because we're starting to go around a curve. So I'm doing 2 half double crochets in the next stitch. So again, you're increasing depending on the shape of your motifs and increasing as you need to. So you're wanting to keep your work with the stitches straight up and down. And again, refer to the beginning tutorial on how to do basic freeform crochet scrumble to learn about when to increase when you're working around the different shapes and so forth. So here I'm going to keep it as a half double crochet and then I'll go into the next stitch, so I'm not increasing, I'm just working into each stitch now. And yeah, the double crochets was just too much pink, so I just pulled that out. And you know, that's totally acceptable. If you crochet something and you don't like it, just pull it out and do it again. Maybe you want to do a different color or you want to change the stitch pattern. It's, you know, whatever you've done doesn't have to be permanent. You can just pull it out. So I'm coming down around the corner here and I'm not sure if I need to do a stitch here. So I'll go down into the tail and see how it looks. And I'm just staying with the half double crochets. And yeah, and that created a bit of a gap. So I would actually pull that out and work an extra stitch into this join here. So I'm just working into then a stitch there. And now I'll go into the teal. And these stitches may pull up a bit when you're working into the top loop only, but once you use the hand steamer, which I highly recommend, you can use the hand steamer and that'll all pull back down. So let's see how this is looking on our template. So I'll line that up on that corner, and so that's looking nice. Let's get this lined up on the bottom. And so I'm going to carry on, and so I've come up to the end here and I've just done the half double crochets and I've gone down to single crochets here. I've done, you know, a couple of single crochets in one of the stitches there, and I'm going to do one more single crochet and do a slip stitch and fasten off. And I just tapered it up to the edge there. And there we go. So I'll just line this up again. And I'm lining this up at the bottom. And that looks good. So now I'm going to fill in this piece here. Now you can go ahead if you feel proficient, but now I'm going to join the red on. It's not this burgundy color. I'm going to bring that into here. And So, of course, this particular style of scrumbling is you're keeping all your stitches facing up. So, of course, you could flip your work back and forth, and if you wanted to, you could come back in this direction with the same color. Just turn your work and work backwards. But I'm wanting to keep all the stitches facing up. That's totally up to you. This is just a particular style that I'm doing. You can play around and do anything you like. So I'm going to make sure this is nice and square on my template, and then I can see that this is here is a good place to join on with a slip stitch. And flip the tail over, and again you can join on any way you like. And so I'll do a single crochet into the next stitch, and you just start building the height of your stitches. So I'm going to go up to a half double crochet here because I know it needs that, and then I'll go right into a double crochet because there's quite a dip here, so I'm building up the height of those stitches quite quickly. And so I'll work some double crochets here for a little bit. And as we get into this deeper part, I might even go into a treble crochet. And let's see. And there's no way I can fill that in, so I'll be adding another layer of color there. So I'm going to do some treble crochets through this deeper part of the dip. And this is totally up to you. You could just work with double crochets. There's no rules. I'm just sort of working at it and making the decisions as I go. And again, if you don't like it, you can always just pull it out and do it again. And maybe even it's the color that you don't like. Maybe you put in the red and decide, oh, I think the green would have looked better, or the teal would look better. So, don't be afraid to undo it and change it. So you can see here, laying it on the template to see how it looks, squaring it on the template. And that's looking pretty good. So I'll do a couple of more treble crochets, and then I'll probably start to bring the stitch height down and go into double crochets. So, and then here I started tapering it to half double crochets and then single crochet and then a slip stitch to finish that off. And see how that's tapering into the pink piece, and again square it on your template. So I have this little dip in here that I'm going to fill in, and I'm going to use the dark purple because I want to use that color up there. I won't show you how I do that because of course you're getting the idea of how this works. So I'll fill that in along there, and I might even bring it around into the corner. So that's the technique. So you can use your fan stitches here and just use different heights of stitches, and say here you're crocheting along, this will be all one color, and you'll bring that up to maybe a treble crochet and join with your treble in the back in the same way that you finished up your fan stitch. You could join it like that and build, build, build. And then you'd have a double or treble here, and then you would join it in the back. Or you may carry on and go past it and keep building on that edge. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this off, and I'll show you how I'm making out. All right, so I'm coming along here. I'm almost done. I just have this little corner piece to do, but I just wanted to point out a couple of little tips along the way. So now, of course, your edges aren't going to be perfectly straight. It's just the nature of this work. If you want, when you're done, you can do a row of single crochet all the way around. But that's just the nature of freeform crochet. So I just wanted to point out that when you go into these corners here, what you can do is to make it a little pointier is to do a chain one. So I joined on with a slip stitch, and then I have a single crochet, a half double, a double, a chain one, a double, a half double, a single crochet, and then a slip stitch to finish that off. So that's just a tip to get a little sharp corner. And then here I started with the dark teal, and I've never done this before, but what I did is I cut a long tail, long enough to give me yarn for this corner, threaded it through here, and then carried on with the teal in this corner. And again, doing that same chain one to make the corner a little more pointy. And then the other thing is I did a bit of a fan stitch coming up here, and it left a bit of a gap. So all you do then, if there's gaps like that, is when you darn in your tail end, just sew those two pieces together to close up the gap. So that's just a little tip there. Now I haven't hand steamed this at all, and it actually looks quite good. The shape is holding really well. But I am going to do a hand steam. I'll finish this corner. If you don't have a hand steamer, you can block this like you would block any other project using the wet method and then pinning it into the shape that you want. So I'm going to do that, and I will be back for the final reveal. All right, so here we go. It's all done, and I've just used this hand steamer. This is a Conair, but any hand steamer is great, and it's really helpful to keep your scrumbles in nice shapes as you're going along, or just to finish at the end. So the freeform crochet is so much fun, and of course I showed you how to do a square just so you could learn the technique to make a specific shape. But of course you can make this in any shape you like. You could make a scarf and make it all kind of curvy in different shapes, or a shawl. By no means do you have to have straight edges. You can have it with an uneven edge, and it would be a lot of fun like that. And then you can make all kinds of projects with this. And say you wanted to make a pouch or a bag, you could just make the motif longer. And sorry, the lighting is changing, this darn camera. But you just make this a bit longer, and you'd sew the sides together and put a nice little button there, and you'd have a lovely little pouch. You could make another panel just like this and sew them together to make a bag. And then if you're making garments, of course, as I mentioned before, you're not including the seam allowance. You're making the pieces within the seam allowance, and you'd be just joining your pattern pieces together as you would as if you were sewing it together, but using the whip stitch. And if you're making a garment, obviously you have some more experience, and you'd want to maybe crochet a collar and finish off in that way. But yeah, the possibilities are endless with this type of crochet. It's very liberating. It's a lot of fun. So I encourage you to be playful and to just have some fun with this. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more creative and inspiring videos.